Uncle Jay wasn't just swinging by for a visit. He was swinging by for a whole lot more. My wife brought her fair partner around, and my kids planned to spend my money together. I caught her in 4K and took everything from her. I'm 35 years old, and my wife, Sarah, is 33. At my age, I think that I have done pretty well for myself. I own a thriving agribusiness, and I recently secured seed funding to take my company to new heights. I'm not being cocky, but I think I'm pretty attractive. I've been told that enough, and I see it myself. So, it sucks that I'm here telling how my marriage might be crumbling to pieces in front of my eyes. I think my wife is cheating on me, and saying that sounds surreal. I feel like I've done everything that a good husband and father should. I met my wife back in university, and it was a chance encounter, but looking back, it felt like fate. She was visiting her brother, who happened to be my roommate. What struck me most was her boldness. She approached me, and not the other way around. With Sarah, I didn't have to go through the mess of going after a woman and having her lead me on or play hard to get. From the moment we met, it was clear she saw something in me, something she wanted in her life. And that was certainly flattering. Our dating days were fantastic. At one point, she practically became our third roommate, sneaking in and out of our tiny apartment as if she belonged there. Nothing stopped her from taking days off just to be with me. She was in love, and so was I. I felt like nothing could ever come between us. Looking back, it's why what I think has happened hurts even more. We got married 8 years after we both graduated. The wedding was everything we dreamed of, and our life together started on a high note. We didn't have much, a small house, an entry-level job as a landscape designer for me, and her working a part-time job while studying for her master's. But we had each other, and that was enough. Back to the present, don't worry. All that background is relevant, as I mentioned. I had recently secured seed funding for the business I co-founded with 2 other partners. We had been grinding for 3 years, and this was our big break. For the past year, I had been traveling across the country, meeting with investors, networking, and pushing our startup forward. Initially, we raised money from personal savings and interested friends and family, but this funding round was our moment to really make an impact. Despite how happy a moment this was meant to be, why, when I finally returned home to start my 4-week break, was Sarah so distant? The plan at work was simple. In turn, each of us would take a 4-week break to reconnect with our families, clear our minds, and brainstorm new ideas for scaling the business. My co-founders would manage the day-to-day operations while I was off, leaving me with nothing to do but relax. After traveling so often, it was obviously very much needed. I have 2 beautiful daughters, and with nothing work-related on my plate, I spent most of my time with them. Last week, I returned early from the golf club because I had a splitting headache. As I passed by the girls' room, I heard my wife in there laughing, like, really laughing. Curious and wanting to join in on whatever the joke was, I walked in. The look on her face when she saw me was unsettling. She was so surprised to see me, and why did she suddenly hang up the call? I kept considering it, but didn't say anything at the moment. Later over dinner, I casually brought it up. "Who were you talking to earlier?" I asked. "Oh, just Jess," she replied nonchalantly. We were talking about her marriage, and I promised her I wouldn't tell anyone until it had been resolved. She replied nonchalant that story didn't align with the laughter I had heard, but I didn't say anything at that point. I pressed further and asked her why she was so shocked when she saw me walk into the room. It was like she didn't want me to hear what was being said. She hesitated and then said, "I just didn't think you'd be home so early, that's all." Something felt off that night. I couldn't get any sleep. My mind was racing with questions. My gut was telling me something was not right. We hadn't been intimate since I got back, so that didn't help matters. She kept saying she was too tired from taking care of the kids, and that the migraine she dealt with made it impossible for us to have the kind of sexual life that we were used to. But honestly, I'm not sure that I was convinced by that. This was the same woman who used to be insatiable. The next morning, I suggested she take a trip to Hawaii as medicine for her stress. She had been begging to go again for ages, since she loved the first time we went so much. She was shocked since this gift came out of nowhere. Really? She seemed genuinely excited about it, and I hadn't seen her that happy in a bit. I told her I was very serious, but I knew my real intentions. I wanted her out of the house so I could investigate without her interference. She had no real suspicion, and she agreed to it. She left on Thursday and is set to return on Monday. That night that she left, I began my investigation. Who better to start with than her daughters, who spend most of their day with their mother? They're 5 and 7, so they're young. But they're old enough to know if something is off, or at least I hoped. I gathered them in the living room, starting with regular conversation and then trying to steer it toward their mother and any potential friends they might have an idea about. "Hey girls, do you know Mommy's friend? The one she always talks to on the phone?" I asked casually. Uncle Jay, the younger one, said very eagerly. I froze on hearing that, and I asked her for clarification on who this guy is. "He's Mommy's friend. He comes over sometimes with ice cream," my older daughter added. I tried to keep my composure and I asked what he looked like. She said that he was tall and funny and he was black. My heart sank when I heard that because here's the thing. We're white with no black heritage whatsoever, as far as I know. So why are my very white daughters so close to a man? They even call him Uncle Jay, a man who has been entering my house without my knowledge. My wife is bringing strange men around my children, and that is very unsettling to me. He clearly couldn't be an actual uncle, and if my suspicion wasn't already through the roof, it definitely was now. Am I being paranoid? Maybe GI is just a harmless friend she was scared to tell me about, knowing I might react exactly how I am now. I know that's just me coping because it doesn't make sense for her to bring another man to her house, and he's an absolute secret to me. How stupid could she be, especially if she was sleeping with him? Or perhaps she kept it from me because I had been away for about a year, chasing funding for the business, and I was rarely home for more than a week at a time. Since I was hardly around, she could get a lot more comfortable with an affair partner, and perhaps she got too comfortable, thinking about it. She wouldn't be able to leave the kids at home, so the man would need to come to her. I have this sinking feeling in my gut that something is very, very wrong. Friday morning, after dropping the girls off at school, I decided to do some sleuthing around the house. I needed answers, anything that might give me some peace of mind. But the more I searched, the more frustrated I became. I found absolutely nothing, not a single clue. By the end of the day, I almost felt relieved. Maybe I was just being paranoid. At the same time, I knew that not finding anything wasn't a confirmation that nothing was happening. Ultimately, I had to let my worry go at that moment. When she got back home, I'd have the chance to do some more in-depth snooping. After lunch, the girls and I played hide and seek. These girls could find the craziest hiding spots, and apart from the potential worry that they would hide somewhere dangerous one day, like the fridge or a suitcase in the attic, it was still fun playing with my girls. To be on the safe side, though, I limited the game to just my room, their mother's office, their bedroom, and the living area. I found one daughter easily enough, but the first one was always trickier. While searching for her in the living area, I accidentally knocked over a tall, hand-woven basket where we kept old books. It was mostly for decoration, making us look more well-read than we probably were, aesthetics and all that. I had searched this basket before when looking for evidence of what another man had been doing in the house, but it seemed that I missed a small, folded origami-like paper tucked in the corner the first time. If I hadn't knocked it over, I might never have noticed it. Even if I saw it, I probably dismissed it as one of the girls' playthings. But this time something compelled me to pick it up and look at it. Later, as soon as we were done, I went to my room and unfolded the paper. The emotions hit me like a freight train. There was shock, bewilderment, anger, disgust, and finally, a deep depression. It was sort of like a cootie catcher, you know, those little hand toys that kids make in school, but this one was far from innocent. Each fold revealed a different position, some familiar, others so extreme I had to Google them. Then I saw the initials AJ at the top and S at the bottom, switching on each side. Ever since I found it, I have not been myself because it confirms that there's something going on, something more than I'd like to know. But I have to know. I am counting the hours until my wife returns, bracing myself for a huge confrontation. In the meantime, I just have to talk to someone. That's why I'm here, letting all this out. I'll be reading all your comments, but I might not have the chance to reply to them. I will still let you guys know how it goes when something new has happened. Well, you know for certain that Uncle Jay is bringing more than just ice cream. He's bringing a trip to Hawaii. That seems quite an elaborate way to get your wife out of the house to do some investigating. But in all seriousness, good luck with that confrontation. If you all can remember, I'm the guy who came to tell the story of my wife, Sarah, who was having a man my children called Uncle Jod over at the house. Everything went down, and I completely forgot to give an update since I was dealing with worse things. But I'm here with what should be the final update on this, since things have come to a conclusion, a painful one, but still a win nonetheless. Sarah eventually got back from her trip, and I surprised myself by not saying anything right away. I helped her with her suitcase and listened to her pointless stories about how the vacation went. The whole time, I kept my face neutral, nodding in the right places and offering fake smiles. Inside, I was boiling. I wanted to punch her over, but I would never and had never laid a hand on her. I wanted hard evidence, something undeniable. That way, if I decided to lose my mind on her, it would be completely justified. If it was true, I continued to knock her sideways with a divorce that would make men all over the world proud of me. I wanted her to suspect that I knew something and make her suffer, so I remained quiet, playing my part. This whole thing hurts so much because I paid for this woman's master's degree. I helped her get the job she currently has and never once cared what she earned because I handled all the bills. It was just 1 year, when I was away more than usual, trying to make our lives better, to give her the dream life we always talked about. And she never complained, not once. If she had, I would have worked on coming home more frequently, but I felt she understood the situation was just temporary. By Monday, I was already attending virtual meetings. Again, by Tuesday, I was back at the workspace we had rented. As soon as I saw Zach, one of my partners and a very good friend, I pulled him aside. I told him that I needed to talk to him about something personal, and he looked at me and asked what was up. I hesitated, then I let it out. I think Sarah's cheating on me. In fact, I'm basically sure of it. I just don't have anything concrete. His eyes widened, and he asked me if I was sure. He seemed as skeptical as I had initially been at the thought of it. He knew her well too, so it seemed out of character for the most part. I proceeded to explain what I had found and how I needed hardcore evidence. I wanted to confront her, making sure she couldn't deny it, so that I could hopefully avoid the need for the divorce to head to a court case. My goal was to ensure she got nothing when I filed for divorce. My wife was relatively respected in our community. I knew she'd want everything. Hush hush, if I had undeniable evidence. Zach asked me what the plan was, so I laid out my strategy and detailed how I planned to get her. Since Zach was more tech-savvy than I am, I asked for his help in getting discrete cameras that could capture both video and sound. He agreed to help me out with that but wanted to know whether I was sure I'd like to see what they could potentially capture. I told him I would be, since I had no other choice. The next week, I set the trap for her early one morning. I mentioned to Sarah that I'd be out of town for 3 days for a big meeting in another state. I also told her that my mom would be taking the kids for a few days, something she had been eager to do. I had already arranged everything with my mom, promising to explain later. I told Sarah all this while pretending to be distracted by packing my briefcase. Out of the corner of my eye, I almost felt like I saw a mild smile. I knew she was already planning what she would do with me and the kids gone. The night before, I had set up the cameras Zach provided, making sure they were hidden but had a clear view of the key areas I felt she might visit. I just hoped that she wouldn't notice them. After breakfast, I said my farewells and left the house. But instead of heading out of town, I checked into a nearby hotel and worked from there during the weekend. I returned home, retrieved the cameras, and got them to Zach as he pulled the footage from the memory card. My worst fears were confirmed around 2 p.m. that day. Sarah paced the living room, phone in hand. I watched as she dialed a number. He's gone. He'll be gone for 2 whole days. Please come over as soon as you can. I miss you, she said. I stood there watching the laptop screen. There was so much fury boiling beside me as I watched her smile at whatever sweet nonsense he was feeding her over the phone. I wanted to smash the laptop, storm into my house, and throw her out, calling her all sorts of horrible things, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed to see more. That evening, a man who must have obviously been Jay arrived. He was tall, dark, and muscular, and as he walked into my home, Sarah practically threw herself into his arms and kissed him. "Missed you so much," she responded. The same went for him. as they talked about how they would soon be together and live the life they wanted. "We'll spend his money together," she added, and they both laughed. Hearing those words twisted something inside of me. My heart pounded inside my chest. I can swear that I've never been so angry in my entire life, and I hated every second of how it felt. I couldn't believe this was happening. My wife was planning a future with this man, the stranger in my own home, and she had brought him around my children too. The footage showed them moving to her office. I was embarrassed to have Zach witness this, but I had to know everything. They started undressing, sharing intimate touches and words that made my skin crawl. I was feeling both humiliated and enraged at that point. I asked Zach to leave because things were going too far, which he did immediately, but I kept watching. Then, they moved to the girls' bedroom. I nearly screamed in that room by myself. My daughter's room should have been off limits at the very least, but it was clear, it was my conclusion, that she was intoxicated by the excitement of what she was doing and seemed to be enjoying how wrong everything was. They were loud, careless, and made a mess of everything as they did these things, and I watched it all, seething with rage but forcing myself to absorb every detail. This was all the evidence I needed, and I wanted to watch it just one time through and then never again. I somehow did that, but if you've never had to watch your woman cheat on you, you don't know how painful it is. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with thoughts of what to do next. I considered filing for divorce immediately and throwing her out into the streets, but I knew that if I acted hastily, I might lose the upper hand. I also knew I needed to account for my daughters in all of this. Their mother couldn't just disappear. I needed to be methodical to destroy her in a way she wouldn't see coming. When I got back, I immediately told her we needed to talk. Her face changed, and she asked me what it was about. I walked into the living room before turning to face her, about what's been going on while I've been away. She replied, "I don't know what you mean." I couldn't believe how convincingly she lied. It made sense how I knew nothing all this time. I pulled out my laptop and set it on the coffee table. "I think you do," I said. She hesitated, then sat down across from me. I opened the video file, and the screen lit up with images of her and G together. Her face turned white as she watched herself on the screen. The betrayal she had tried so hard to keep hidden was now playing out before her eyes. I was just looking at her face the entire time. I didn't want to or need to look at the video again. That was when she started to gravel. Please don't do this," she begged, tears welling up. I told her to shut up and was shocked at how venomous I sounded. I wasn't having any of it. She broke down, sobbing into her hands, apologizing and saying it was all a mistake. I snapped, "It was no mistake. Mistakes happen once, maybe twice, but not when you plan a whole affair and a scheme to spend my money." She started pleading, saying she'd do anything, swearing on her parents' lives. I think I started laughing. Maybe it was a bitter laugh, or a happy one. No idea, but it felt good in its own way. I stood up, staring down at her. "It's too late for that. We're done, Sarah. I want a divorce." She turned even paler, her eyes wide with fear. She tried to grab my legs, but I pulled away. I told her to get a lawyer, and if she fought me, I'd make sure she got nothing. I'd ruin her perfect reputation that she's worked so hard to cultivate. At that moment, she must have realized that the big break my company was going to get was going to be entirely out of her reach because she messed everything up in the final stretch. Her sobbing intensified, and she begged me not to take the children. I told her I would be taking them, and that if she fought me in court, I'd expose the time she almost drowned our second daughter due to postpartum depression and the opioids she had been abusing, not once but twice. I know how hard PPD can be on mothers, but in that moment, I needed my get back. I assured her that I'd make sure she never got near the girls again, because who's to say she might not become depressed again after the divorce and end up jumping back on opioids, which would put my kids at risk. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal meetings and divorce negotiations. Sarah tried to fight it at first, but I made sure she knew that if she did, I'd drag her through the mud. I made that part clear over and over. In the end, she agreed to settle with my divorce demands. She signed off full custody of the girls to me, though there was obviously some space for visitation. As much as I now resented her deeply, I wanted my girls to have a mother still. She also managed to negotiate and walk away with a lump sum in place of alimony, but not enough to make me lose sleep. She'd likely spend it all to get an apartment, since I was keeping the house. She could spend that money with Jay if she wanted, but it wouldn't last them both very long. Her once bright future now looked bleak, and I made sure she knew it. But even after the divorce was finalized, she continued to beg for forgiveness. Every day, I received texts and emails and calls that I never picked up from her, pleading for another chance, asking me to reconsider. She said she couldn't live without me, that she was sorry, and that she would do anything to make it right. She said I could cheat with as many people as I wanted, and she would accept it and even encourage it. She was grasping at straws with all her attempts, but I ignored them all. There was nothing left to save, quite honestly. I thought of it back then. Even if I decided to get back with her, it would be horribly empty and fake. I didn't need her to be a major part of my life ever again, and that's how my marriage of almost 9 years ended. It sucks when something that was once so treasured comes to an end, but it wasn't worth fighting for anymore. And as much as life is different now, I'll get used to it. Right now, I just wanted to focus on my girls. That's what will keep me going. I appreciate all of you for the support on my first post, and I'll just say that if you're going through something similar, you're surely going to make it out alive. You've got to love when they start offering deals like, you can cheat as much as you want, as if that's going to fix anything. Anyway, now that she's left with some sad sum of money, and Jay, who I'm sure will be thrilled to spend her hard-earned scraps until he realizes that love doesn't pay rent. Much respect to you, OP.